Welcome to the Esoteric Deathspiral.
Of music.
Welcome. Alright. Welcome everyone back to the Esoteric Music Deathspiral. I am Noisebandit, joined by my co-hosts, Ray and Max. And today we are
Hello.
starting something a bit special. This is going to be a bi-weekly series where we look at all the albums by American new prog band, the Mars Volta. Now, to give a bit of backstory on this band, the Mars Volta were, like I just said, a progressive rock band formed by guitarist Omar Rodriguez Lopez and vocalist and lyricist Cedric Bixler Zavala.
Who you may remember from the band.
Foss, with Beto O'Rourke.
Beto O'Rourke 2020.
Whoa! What
But-
is this? We gotta keep the politics out of music, guys.
Oh no! But, okay. So in actuality, you might actually remember them from the cult classic post-hardcore band At the Drive-In, of which this band was descended from.
Yeah, and there's a little bit more division in the fan bases of these two bands than you might expect. And I think the reason for this is just a difference in base mindset. See, an At the Drive-In fan would listen to a Mars Volta song and say, "Why are there 5 minutes of bullshit in the middle of the song?" Whereas a Mars Volta fan would be like, "Yes, we've gotten to the 5 minutes of BS. That's my favorite part."
I'm just gonna go sit here stoned out of my mind listening to the sound of two guitars having sex with each other.
Pretty
just
much, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this band is quite interesting.
Well, in terms of the history of the Mars Volta itself, though, um, they've been a rather chaotic band, not just in their music, but in their formation, too. Um, when they started out, they were made up of Cedric, Omar, John Theodore on drums, Ava Gardner on bass, and Isaiah Ike Owens on the keyboards. And that lineup remained consistent for the Tremulant EP, which I'll get back to in a moment. But even before Deloused came out, they had already lost their bassist, and so for this album, Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers filled in, because they just outright had no official bassist.
Yeah. I mean, they had a couple, but it was it was only like people that would join for like a couple months.
Yeah, like, if you look at the Wikipedia page, it shows, like, a timeline of their members, and, like, the bass one is just, like, a bunch of really short lines, and then one super long one.
Yeah, it's just like a descending stairs of blue.
Exactly. And then they're also rather chaotic in terms of the style. At the Drive-In was, of course, a post-hardcore punk band. And aspects of that sound still remain in the Mars Volta's sound, but then beyond that, it's like they took that and then they also they put that in the blender, and then also in the blender is Pink Floyd, Red Hot Chili Peppers, salsa music, ambient music, and jazz music,
And don't forget funk.
and funk, and
Yeah,
and maybe just a little bit of emo, the genre. That's the spice
And-
they put on top at the end.
and a couple hairs of afro hair. Yeah,
Exactly.
a couple strands of afro hair to sparkle in there to give you the perfect Mars Volta smoothie.
And served in a cup of surrealism.
Yeah, and just like completely bonkers lyrics.
Yes, which, if we're gonna talk about the lyrics, there's a few ways of looking at them. A rather common and rather cynical one is to say, well, Cedric just has like two dictionaries and two thesauruses for every language that he knows. So
Yeah.
he just kind of goes in there and chooses the coolest words possible.
So he's like the Voltron of dictionaries.
Yeah,
He's
yes,
just got, like,
he's just made
two-
of them.
Yeah, two dictionaries for arms and two thesauruses for legs.
Yes, but there's a more charitable way to look at it, which is that all of the Mars Volta's albums are concept-ish. These first two are the only ones that follow a linear narrative, like The Wall or 2112, or, all the famous concept albums.
Green Day, American Idiot.
Everything by Coheed.
Yeah.
But uh, even when they're not direct concepts, they tend to have a sort of theme guiding them, and their lyrics, in most concept albums, the lyrics are kind of drenched in metaphor, and usually that's because it's a story with like themes and such, and so you don't always, and so in most stories there's going to be a ton of metaphor. And the song
And
lyrics themselves are already a little bit more abstract than many forms of writing, because they're essentially poems, and they're not just, poems that the words themselves are conveying the meaning, but they also are, having the music do a decent amount of the lifting too. So, if you want a general lens to view the Mars Volta's lyrics through, so this album, Deloused in the Comatorium, in case we didn't say it, is dedicated to the sound manipulator for the first couple Mars Volta albums, a man named Jeremy Michael Ward, who died shortly before the album release of a heroin overdose. And one time Omar recounted a story of the two of them being getting high at one point, and at one time Jeremy Michael Ward asked him if he could see the worms coming out of his head, which on the surface just sounds like, a weird thing someone says when they're high, but if you think about it, like in terms of his mental state at the time, it kind of reads as a cry for help. And I think that's kind of what a lot of Mars Volta lyrics are. they're extremely weird phrases, but if you look at it from that sort of almost lucid mindset, you can kind of interpret something like pretty biting emotionally.
Yes. I was gonna say, like, it's the crying for help out of like the giant hole of thesauruses he's in, and just like he's just throwing pages up, just trying to get any kind of meaningful thing out to the people he's trying to get rescued from, but he just can't because it's just all piled in like thesaurus pages. If that makes sense.
This is a re-recording, and I still forgot to turn my phone to fucking silent. All
Breaking
right.
the fourth wall.
Well, I mean, there has to be some kind of explanation for the weird vibrating noise the audience just heard. I think, so I mentioned before this album came out, about a year before, they recorded an EP called the Tremulant EP. It's only 19 minutes, so I would recommend giving it a quick listen, because I think it's interesting to see the sort of evolution of their sound. The first two songs on that sound a lot more like At the Drive-In than most of the music on this album does. And then the last track, Eunuch
Provocator.
Yeah, Eunuch Provocator. I almost said Enoch, but that's not how you say E and U together.
Brian Eno.
Oh no. Actually, no, wait, that would be a good thing. Anyway, that song, meanwhile, is much more. It's hinting a lot more towards the sound they'd go for on this album. The riffs are a bit crazier. There's a big ambient section at the end. A lot of vocal effects over everything. The title itself is impossible to figure out what it means. The title of this album is even mentioned in that song. So that song is almost like a prequel to the album, or predecessor.
You could say that it's the wait, I forgot what I was gonna say. It's just all right.
Either way, so before I stop completely dominating the conversation, I should say, like I mentioned, this is a concept album. So it follows a story, of course. The story is about, well, firstly, it's based on a real-life friend of Omar and Cedric's by the name of Julio Venegas, who is a local poet and musician in their hometown who had tried to purposefully overdose on heroin, but he survived that after being in a coma for a long time. But after he woke up, he threw himself off the roof of the hospital he was kept at. The story of this album is about a very similar character by the name of Serpentaxed, who essentially goes through the same arc, but we see his coma. Every song except for the first and last, which take place in the real world, are essentially about him going through his own mind and battling the evils within. Two of the songs, Inertiatic ESP and Cicatrice ESP, the ESP in there, it does not stand for extrasensory perception. It stands for ectopic shapeshifting penance propulsion, which is a vehicle that he uses to traverse the various locations in the story. Why do I bring that up? I bring it up because of the last word there, penance. That's essentially what the story is about, and essentially the fact that he never quite manages to find it.
I think it should be mentioned that he overdoses on a mixture of morphine and rat poison. It just sounds like the most horrible thing to actually overdose on. Like, I don't even imagine what that must feel like. It's like you're...
It makes all the extremely weird shit he sees in his head. You can buy those are the kinds of visions he'd have.
No.
Only
Oh, God.
last thing I'll say about the story. One, I think I actually got the two songs wrong. I don't think it's the first and last track. I think it's the first track and the 9th track, Televators, that take place in the real world. And also, the story was later adapted into a short novella by Cedric, which I haven't read, mostly because I kind of like it when I can keep a concept album to that very metaphorical level, and also because I don't want to spoil everything that happens for the viewers. Like, I mean, I spoiled most of the ending, but I mean, it's the journey, not the destination, and all that stuff.
Yeah, no. It's kind of hard to really sort of wrap your head around a story where, like, the first couple lines are just, like, drowned in just, like, all these words, all of this purple prose. It just, yeah.
Yes, I'll just, quickly read the first two sentences here, because you can find it just on Genius. So the first two sentences. Serpentax stood high above the wobbling miscarriage of oncoming traffic. He was weak in the knees. Sentence 1, not too hard. Blackened out of sync, knew his time here would soon end with an internal hemorrhaging made aware by the animonstrosity of his Franken-statue presence.
Sounds like a really long Harry Potter spell.
Especially Franken-statue. I could actually see that being a Harry Potter spell.
I don't know. Magicus Nova Frankenstatuus. I don't fucking know.
But so,
yeah,
needless to say, the whole story is very cryptic. There's a lot of people who... there are entire forums dedicated to solving the story of the first two albums. People, write out entire scripts to decode these, and I mean, that makes sense. I mean, look at the titles here. There's 3 languages just used in the titles of the songs.
Yeah, especially when it, I mean, it's not like this is before he starts singing in other languages. He doesn't do that until we get to the next album, but
yeah,
it makes it pretty clear that he's got a little bit of an interest in singing in different languages.
Yeah, which, I mean, he was a high school dropout, so he didn't have time to have his entire mind numbed by shitty English classes.
Commentary. But alright, so we've been talking for way too long about what this album is about and the stuff. We should probably actually get into what we think about this album.
Yes, let's start with Max, because we've been talking over them for a year and a half.
So overall, this album is basically what my life is about, minus the heroin. It's what my life feels like. I do have some problems with it. specifically towards the end, but we'll get into that later. But I'd say it's like a strong 8 light 9. Again, this is like another album I really love. I listened to it the first time I listened to it. I gave it like a 5 because I was kind of just confused and bored. But like when it comes to neo prog, I have to be in a really depressive, anxious mood because it's very I don't know why, but neo prog really helps me when I'm in one of those moods, and I listen to the album in that mood and realize that it's a work of genius and it's nearly perfect.
right.
Neo-prog is actually the movement of progressive rock from the 80s. The movement from the 2000s is known as new prog, but actually we shouldn't be using any of these terms because it's all just prog and it's all cool. And the only
Yeah.
reason I don't think it's cool is because I'm deeply insecure about possibly liking music that has any influence from a time after the 1980s.
All right. So my thoughts on this album is, so if I were to rank every single Mars Volta album, this album would be second best, on the same sort of level as Francis the Mute. Both those albums are tied for my second favorite Mars Volta album, and it's because both this album and Francis have their own sort of specific issues that sort of prevent them from being my number one favorite. And I think the problem I have with this album overall is the production. It's very like loud and just not that well mixed at points. I mean, like, it works sometimes, like the loudness, but other times it just feels like way too overbearing and stuff, and it just kind of it racks your brain, but like not in a good way.
Yeah. All the Mars Volta albums are mixed pretty loud. Like, if you look at all of them, they all at some point have clipping in them. But this is the only one of their albums that is not isn't produced only by Omar himself. Because he co-produced this album with Rick Rubin, infamous and famous producer, who either you think he was cool in the 90s and then he became a complete hack, or you think he was always good. With this album, I think the production is mostly pretty good. Like, I like the sound of pretty much all the instruments on it. Like, I think like the drums sound pretty big, the bass sounds pretty thick and heavy. The keyboards sound nice. I like most of the vocal effects that they do, and the guitar tone is pretty unique. But yeah, the uniform loudness can be a bit of a problem because eventually you end up just like needing to turn it up every couple songs just to make sure that you're hearing it correctly, and then eventually you just get to max volume and then you're just like, all right, I guess we're just gonna sit here for a bit, or you just pause it at some point and then you start it again and then you have to turn it down again and then you're turning it up again. You're kind of constantly battling with the little volume wheel.
Yeah, I've had that experience before listening to the songs on the sound where it just at one point it's really quiet, but it's like not quiet enough to where like you can't hear it, and then it just like blasts you and you're just like, fuck my ears.
Yeah.
But
the only time
also
the only time that it
also
ever really quiets down, sorry, I just want to expand on this point just a little bit, is whenever whenever the album goes into a more ambient section, which one kind of thing you might notice if you listen to this album and then compare it with like Francis the Mute, the one after this, is that in this album you almost forget that there is as much like ambience on it as there is, whereas with Francis the Mute a lot more of it is gonna get stuck with you, like, and there's gonna be a few more moments that kind of grab you because like there'll be times when a section there will be one of the loudest portions of the song. Yeah, we can and I can go into my example of that in a little bit.
Also, I was gonna say, fun fact about this album: this is the only album that the Mars Volta have ever made where Omar Rodriguez Lopez didn't write all the music exclusively by himself, because track 5 and track 8 are both co-written by Omar and Cedric. He co-wrote both those songs, so, and I guess maybe it kind of shows on those songs, but we'll get to them when we get to them.
Yes. In terms of my overall opinion, I'd also say it's my second favorite Mars Volta album out of the ones I've listened to. I've listened to the first four. Um, and yeah, obviously I agree on the production. My only other problem with it is that, in general, if I compare this to their next album, which I know I shouldn't do that, but but it's pretty, but I kind of want to anyway because probably they kind of parallel each other in a lot of ways, and they're the only two albums, like I said, that follow this formula of being linear narratives. Um, and when I listen to like that album, it's extremely cinematic. All the songs have a long fade in and fade out, and the mix is like incredibly deliberate, and there's so much just kind of, the album has such a narrative flow to it, and this one does have a pretty great overall flow and structure to it. um and I like the narrative it's conveying, and I like the way it conveys it, but I think the fact that on that album they don't give a fuck about the song structure. With the exception of two songs, they just really go all over the place, um structurally, whereas this album, it's a lot more structured, and I think at times that can make it feel like it doesn't reach the same highs as some of the other albums in their discography.
Yeah,
um
like it's a lot more sort of, verse chorus verse, which, that isn't inherently a bad thing, but like when you have a band as crazy and insane as the Mars Volta, it kind of just makes it feel like, they just kind of did a cop out. But
I
I
wouldn't
mean, this
really
is their
say
first
that.
album.
Yeah, I'd say it's more just kind of that they're growing into the sound. And I mean, to be fair, I think that's part of why this is their highest selling and most critically acclaimed album. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think some people have rated, like, I think if you were to take critic scores, I think maybe Francis the Mute would be rated better, but that album's a lot more divisive. So this is
Yeah.
definitely the most well liked overall of their albums. And I think Rick Rubin evening things out on a production level also probably helped with that. Still too
I mean,
out there
like,
for Pitchfork, though.
yeah. I think it should be noted is that Pitchfork, like, really does not like this band. Like, they gave this first album a 4.9 out of 10, and they gave the next album, Friends of the Moon, a 2 out of
Two.
10, because they just complained that the band is just pretentious, which, I think I could, say that they're calling was it like the pot calling the kettle black, but, I don't want to, go into too much detail.
Fuck
I don't want
Pitchfork.
I don't want Pitchfork to sue us.
Yeah, it took until Octahedron for them to give the Mars Volta a positive score at all. They gave that album a 6 out of 10. All the other albums, this was a 5, Francis was 2, Amputecture was 3.5, Bedlam and Goliath was 4.5, and then I don't even think they gave a review to Nocturnica. It doesn't list it on Wikipedia here.
It's funny because like it's just like 5 and then just like 2, 3, 4. They literally just like went slightly better after each album, but nothing to juice your pants over.
Yep.
Okay, but we were talking a little bit too much about this. Now it's time to get into the track by track of this album. Starting with the first two, which is basically just one song, Son et Lumière, which is French for sound and light, and Inertiatic ESP.
Okay, before we get into this, I just want to say, I think it's 100% okay that we've spent so much time talking about, like, the background and all this other stuff, because, with a Mars Volta album, there's so much going on. Like,
Right.
we didn't even talk about the cover, and how the cover is, like, its own story that's separate from the rest of the album.
Yeah.
And, like, and also that it was done by the same guy who did fucking Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, Storm Thorgerson, I think his name is. He did the first he did the first 2 album covers for this band. Then after that, the band just kind of got lazy and just like hired some painter to make the next 3 album covers.
He was supposed to do the third, but they didn't like the album cover that he made.
Yeah, which is kind of a disappointment because that cover is really cool. If you've seen it, it's basically just like a picture of like a nun in a field, like shouting at a giant like disco ball looking skull.
I actually thought it was kind of garish myself, but we can talk about that on the Amputexture podcast. So yeah, these first two songs, which are really just kind of one song that suddenly goes from like 0 to 50 to 50 to 100.
Because it starts out with like this sort of, quiet keyboard melody and these sort of guitar swells with sort of Cedric singing in this very kind of like ominous way with like a lot of vocal effects on it, singing about, how he's like a terrible person with, having to get his skin grafted off. And then just like these pounding drums come in and like the guitar goes in full swing, and then just like after a couple runs of that, Inertiatic ESP comes in just firing on all cylinders with Cedric screaming out of the top of his lungs about how he's lost,
Yeah.
and it's just everything just going insane. And then yeah, the song is forever amazing.
Yeah, it's really great. Like it just it starts off with this kind of like radio static, and then these sort of ominous keyboards, a kind of I know this isn't usually a word to use to describe sound, but like a kind of cryptic guitar coming
Yeah.
in. And yeah, the lyrics here are nice cuz they are a little bit bizarre, but they're definitely conveying kind of the self-loathing of the protagonist pretty well, where he says he's gestating with all the other rats, the vermin you need to loathe. And then
Yeah.
we upgrade the angst tenfold, and then he's just screaming about being lost, and it's beautiful. Like, that's one thing I love. One thing about the Mars Volta is that sometimes they can get surprisingly direct. In spite of being such a weird band, they can get quite direct with the lyrics, and sometimes, like on this song, they just do like a pretty poppy structure, but they always do it justice, at least on the albums I've listened to.
Yeah, we can get into more their straightforward lyrics when we get to the Octahedron podcast, because that album kind of, I wouldn't say dumbs down, but kind of makes the lyrics more direct. But I mean, like until then, all their lyrics, with the exception of a couple, are always just like weird. But we've already went over that, so yeah. So this song is it's interesting because it's just got a lot going for it for a first track. It's just like you have the powerfulness, and then you just have like Omar's really powerful like sort of chugging riff during the verse, in between the powerful drums and just like the shredding guitar, where he's just like chugging along really fast, and it's impressive how like I'll probably talk about this a lot more in detail when we get to their later albums, but Omar is a fucking great guitarist. Like he's one of the most underrated guitarists I think, like in the past 20 years, if not ever. Like this man somehow on his own created this really unique way of playing guitar that you really haven't seen anywhere else, with just like crazy ass fucking solos, just like really fast shredding, but also he's also able to make like really off-kilter melodies like seem poppy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he can make like pretty weird and technical riffs that still end up being really catchy. I think the thing about Omar is that Omar has described playing the guitar as a battle for him, because he wanted to be a pianist, but he was better at playing guitar, so he just ended up doing that. And you can really hear that when you get into the solos, and like this is the first real solo on the album, and it's all these like weird borderline atonal high notes that are just kind of like blaring through the speakers, and they kind of like put it through a filter just so that it doesn't sound like quite so harsh, which I think that's one other thing about Omar, is that he knows. I think part of the reason that he can make his riffs sound as good as he does is through the production. Like,
yeah,
I don't think enough people really look at music production as kind of its own. Like, producers are kind of musicians in their own right. I think a lot of people just, no thanks to people like Rick Rubin, or just come in and turn the volume up on everything. I think like there's a real art to production, and I think Omar's kind of mastered it.
Yeah, I think it should be important to say as well that he described the reason why he played guitar was because of the fact that his band members in his previous band at the Drive-In said that it was like the one instrument that they could relate to, so he just did it. And like that's kind of the reason why he used a lot of effects, or like used a lot of effects, was because of the fact that he wanted to make his guitar sound as like un-guitar-like as possible.
Yeah, I mean, like, in this song, and I mean, in this song, you can kind of see that with the fact that in the chorus, the lead guitar part is just kind of matching up with the keyboard. Um, and then in the rest of the song, there's a really interesting thing going on musically where the keyboard parts are these kind of like more, they're this a lot calmer than most of the song. Like,
Yeah.
when you get into the verse, you have you have these like really like fast tremolo notes just kind of coming in on only one side of the speaker, just kind of blaring through there. But then on the other side, you have these really almost melancholic keyboard notes coming through.
Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of dichotomy.
Yeah.
And it goes away during the chorus where the keyboard just plays this admittedly still pretty cool kind of like back and
Building.
forth. Yeah, sort of back and forth building and then going down again riff that, I think one of the strong suits of Mars Volta was the keyboardist Isaiah Ike Owens. He's just like he adds another layer to the band that they probably couldn't have achieved with just guitars.
Yeah, it's really a shame that they lost him.
Yeah, because he died in 2014 from a heart attack while
Yeah.
touring with Jack White.
Though
Which,
even before then, I think he left the band.
Oh yeah, no, okay, that's what you meant. Yeah, he left. I think around like 2011. Like even though he didn't perform on Octahedron, he was still in the band and still played on that tour. It was just after the tour ended, he like left the band.
To Wikipedia, away. He left after. He's credited on Octahedron, but he didn't actually play on the album, meaning his last one was Bedlam and Goliath.
Yeah, but I meant like he played like on tour with the band on Octahedron. He just didn't like play on the album. But yeah, and his contributions are very important, especially on like this first track on this album, where like we said, it like sort of contradicts the guitar in a very interesting way.
Yeah. And like really pretty much all the instrumentation on here is pretty great. Like the drums are
Yes.
John Theodore is an absolutely amazing drummer. Like his patterns tend to be pretty complex and distinct, but just incredibly powerful. Like in the chorus, it's not too complex. It's just kind of the snares are accenting the 2 and the 3 on all of the beats there, but he's like putting in these little like double bass hits sound like really cool and are kind of adding to the power in there. And then when we get into the bridge, which switches into a 7/4 time signature, he suddenly busts out this like really cool kind of Latin sounding groove, and
Yeah.
like it really combined with like the guitar kind of fading out and then coming back in with the weird solo, like it really just kind of it's like the song just kind of throws a big curveball right there, which is
Yeah,
great
also-
because like it kind of helps the song like it is a pop structure. It is, verse, start off with the hook and then verse chorus solo, bridge, chorus, and then a little outro there. But this song doesn't feel like a pop song.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it. And I think, that's helped by like the outro having like those kind of weird reversed guitar noodling
Yeah.
at the end there, and some other stuff like that. But like, I think a lot of it just comes down to these little flourishes in the instrumentation there and the weird lyrics that are coming in too.
I think if I can go back to the drums, can I just say, like, holy hell, are like the drum rolls on this album really fucking powerful? Like during the going back to the previous song, Sonnet to Lumiere, how the song ends is just the guitar and the drums, but the drums are just like huge, just like powerful drum rolls that slam into your skull, and like I said, it is loud, but it works really well, especially at the end of Initiatic, not like at the very end, but like right before the weird sort of reverse notes, where
Yeah.
sort of not Omar, but Cedric singing the really sort of high notes. Right before that, there's the last couple drum fills, and the roll is just like just really powerful, really just like hit sort of this kind of like sort of, I don't know how to describe it, sort of primal sort of urge to just like, I don't know, beat your drums with a belt.
Well, I see.
Yeah,
But there's, yeah, and one thing that's nice about just continue to gush about the drums. One thing that's really great is that we talked about the snare rolls, but every once in a while he'll switch out and just leave it to like an open hi-hat and the kick drum. And either way, it's just like pummeling your speakers. Like whenever I listen to Son et Lumiere in my car, it's like I turn up the volume quite a bit because the opening part of it's like pretty quiet, and then just everything just comes in all at once, and I could just like feel it in the car. It's great. I think
Yeah.
that's probably the best moment production wise on the album, because that's one of the only times where they have a big dynamic shift just right away.
Yeah. So I think me and Ray have been dominating this conversation, but what do you think about the song, Max?
I have I have a story to kind of go with this. So there's this one time where it was in November of 2017. I was making this big YouTube video that was like 5 hours long, and I was going through a really hard time. I was generally under a lot of stress. School wasn't going too well either, and I just felt completely lost. And we decided to go. My family decided to go on vacation to this beach house in South Carolina, this very rural, by the beach area. And I decided I was like really angry. I didn't decide I was angry, but I was really angry. I was really upset. So I decided to take a walk, and that walk turned into screaming on the beach, punching the ocean to death grips while screaming all the lyrics to No Love Deep Web. But during the journey there, I was listening to this song, and it has a lot of emotional resonance to me because it just reminds me of how I was feeling at the time. It was the perfect song for me. Now I am lost. It's great, 10 out of 10. That's not analysis. Fuck you. Personal experiences are more valuable. I don't care.
Right.
Well, that's both actually, and that's cool.
Yeah, and speaking of like sort of those opening sort of screams from Cedric of "Now I'm lost," because it's just that one lyric, but he sings it in all these different like sort of swells, and like obviously I'm not going to sing because I'm terrible at it, but like you probably can get the idea of what I mean by just listening to the song. It's really interesting how he does it.
Well, especially at the end there, the last one he sings has this like swell at the end of it, like, and it's kind of like a weird like da da kind of progression in terms of the notes there that he's singing, which really it's great because you have this like big like build in the vocals there, and then everything kind of dies down a little bit for the verse. It's not like a loud, quiet, loud thing, but it's like just dynamic enough that everything is really going to catch your attention here. So yeah, just overall a great song, and also probably I think, while I did recommend listening to the EP, I'd recommend listening to it after this album, because this opening duo of songs here is just like the perfect way to get into the Mars Volta, really.
Yeah, it's I think that actually must have been the first Mars Volta song I've ever listened, or I had ever listened to, and I think that was probably good on me because I can't imagine any other album sort of starting with the Mars Volta, because every other album just would have been too much.
What, you're saying you don't want to start with Tetragrammaton?
Yeah.
You're saying you don't want to start with the kiosk in my temporal lobe is shaped like Rosalind Carter?
All right, yeah, crazy. All right, so is that we've kind of been going on this first song for a little much, but have we said all our thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so next song on the album, Roulette Dares, in parentheses, The Haunt of. All right, first thing I could say about this song is the opening riff, really cool, and also like really weird and off kilter. Like it's just like this weird kind of partially chuggy, but also like not, with these really kind of sort of contradicting high notes and low notes, and just like the production really kind of shows that off, where the sort of the channels are really like centralized, like they're not super separate, so it just kind of sounds really weird and lo-fi-y, but there's like it works. Like you just have just like this feeling of claustrophobia while listening to all like the drums and the bass and everything, just like really sort of all clumped in on itself and not just like all spread out. If that makes sense.
uh, yeah, I think I know what you mean.
It just works. But also the song is notable because of the fact that it's got, even more than Oceanic, like really interesting dynamics where it has this really loud part with, Cedric screaming really far back into the mix with just a lot of like vocal effects where you can barely tell what he's saying, and then it gets this like really quiet part with these like very sort of like melodic keys, and Omar playing these kind of really also calming arpeggios, with Cedric singing this really kind of quiet kind of you know vocal style, and it's a really sort of strong sort of digression from the past thing where it was just really loud and in your face.
This song kind of feels like it's taking the dynamics of the previous one and exaggerating it a bit. Like it similarly has like these, like the verses are similarly kind of a step down from the choruses, but in this one, not in terms of quality, of course. But like in this one, they're a lot calmer. They're very calming, almost, and they're kind of like Pink Floyd-y in terms of the instrumentation, which I think is pretty cool. Like
it's like Pink Floyd, but not shit.
Uh-oh.
Hot take.
I guess we're gonna have to do a Pink Floyd marathon now.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It would be like for this marathon. Oh god, that was a remix. For this marathon, it's a half marathon because we're only doing it every other week. For that one, it would be a half marathon because we'd only talk about the important albums.
Yeah, who wants to talk about the Division Bell?
The only good one?
Oh shit, I guess that's one of the important ones now.
This is the hot take central, but
oh no, we need to get back on track here.
Yeah.
But so structurally, this one is interesting because it's still pretty, like, it's not super out there, but it's like it's putting just enough twists on the typical song structure that's pretty cool, because like you have these really chaotic sections, and I guess that those would be the verses, and then you get into there's the really calm section that's kind of like a second type of verse entirely, and then you get the big triumphant chorus, and then we're back into the chaotic part, back into the chorus, and then we get this like kind of jam that makes up the bridge here, that's like back to the really calming feel, and then one more big chorus, and then sort of a second jam that's extended a bit with some nice weird vocal effects over it.
Yeah, it's very it really shows when you watch like a live video of it where they like extend both the jams to like really long, and like they almost double the track length. It's and especially with the later live videos where they have sort of the extended lineup with the extra percussionists and stuff, it really sort of makes it feel a lot more alive and stuff.
Yeah, there's a video of them performing live around the time of Bedlam and Goliath that I'd actually really recommend watching, just because somehow the person who uploaded it to YouTube managed to acquire like the stems from it, so it sounds way better than most live recordings do. And
Are you talking about the one you did at Yahoo?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
Okay,
but
because there's like the live forms they did for like a Yahoo Nissan thing, and it's like Roulette Dares and like a couple songs off of. Actually, it's mostly songs off of Tetra. It's mostly songs off of Ambitexture. and like a couple songs, or I think it's like one song. Actually, no, it's basically just like most of the songs off of Tetragrammaton and Bedlam.
Whatever, I'll
with,
link it in
like-
the description. Point is,
Yeah.
they do like a 20-minute version of this song in that live performance. And I mean, I will admit, I looked at the runtime like 2 or 3 times, but it still was really cool because it still sounded like the same song, you know? But so yeah, structurally this one's really interesting. Sonically it continues to be pretty interesting. This one, I'm pretty sure there's still like a time signature change or two, but it's not quite as obvious as with Inertiatic ESP.
Yeah, but it's I think Max had a funny story with this as well.
Yep.
Oh yeah, it's like a kind of a continuation from the story from the last song. It's like my walk back after beating up the ground to death grips. It's like a very triumphant journey back home, and that's kind of the appeal of the song. It again, it kind of sounds like a Pink Floyd song, but I actually like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you can and that's not entirely baseless lyrically. The big lyric that they sing in the chorus, exoskeletal junction at the railroad delay, is that's kind of what it's about, is metaphorically, because it's about like mind and body reconnecting.
Yeah.
At least that's what it says on Genius. One person marked it as a stretch, but I don't care. It's cool, so that's what I believe.
Yeah. I mean, with lyrics as weird as that, you can only like I think the first line of the song is transient jet lag echo mimed bison.
Yep.
So yeah, no, but I think what's really interesting about the song is how sort of the chorus, the opening riff is just like this very sort of triumphant sort of, really sort of powerful in your face cup thing where it really does feel like you're just walking up a hill after, beating up the ground to death grips or whatever the fuck Max was talking about. Yeah. Alright, so anything else on this song?
No.
While we're talking about the chorus, I love that the last lyric of the chorus, it's because this is, and then they never explain what it is. I like that this really triumphant, grandiose chorus ends on an unanswered question.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It really shows how I don't know, like level 100 Cedric is on his lyrics.
Level 100.
That's not how Mafia works.
Oh, hey, we got a current meme. We did it. This podcast is relevant now.
Okay.
Actually, no, it became relevant with the Beto O'Rourke joke.
Yeah, no. Alright, so after this song, there is sort of an in-between song called Tírame las Añas, I think. And in Spanish it means
throw me to the spiders.
Yeah, throw me to the spiders, and there's not really much to say about the song because it's mostly just kind of like sort of an in-between guitar thing where, it's bizarre because of the fact that they decided to make it a separate track and instead of just like at the end of Roulette Dares or the beginning of the next song, which is Drunk Ship of Lanterns, which is the first song co-written with Cedric, and it kind of shows because this song is it's quite interesting.
Quick thing.
And the reason,
sorry, I just wanted to say before we move on to Drunk Ship of Lanterns about Tírame a las Arañas, how I think so. The title there is not infamously, but it's kind of misspelled in that Tírame should just be one word. I think they did that on purpose because separating it like that makes it the same number of words as the English equivalent phrase. So I think they did that to make it a little bit easier to translate.
Maybe. But yeah, so next song, Drunk Ship of Lanterns. First thing that is notable first thing that is notable about this song is the drums and percussion.
Yep.
It's quite amazing.
Yep.
Because it's just like these like multi-layered percussion where you just have the drums and like these congas and then like these maracas and also these kind of like I think they're called claves or claws. I don't know what they're called, but like you just get this very kind of upbeat sort of jogging along feeling while listening to the song. It's the perfect song to run to because the drums are just so like
They're
just
primal.
yeah, they're
Very
primal.
primal. Like, it's like when you're jerking off to hentai. It's like when you're a fucking madman running around and you're not running around, you're in your sweaty ass chair and you're home alone. You're free to be a fucking degenerate monkey and you fucking jerk off to all the hentai you can. You have degraded. You are no longer civilized. You cannot be led around another woman ever again because you're just so ashamed. But right now you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about beating your fucking dick. This is the pinnacle of primal music. Fuck primitive shit. Like, I don't know. I don't listen to music. No.
Perfect.
Enough of it.
Now, of course, that is not what's going on in the story. But
Yes, it is. It's, for me, it is.
Okay, well, that you're free to your interpretation. But in the story, this the setting of this song is a submarine graveyard, which is such a inherently like anxious feeling to that setting because it's like a submarine itself. You're just in this like big enclosed metal vehicle just kind of traveling underwater with like tons of pressure surrounding it, and you can hear all your footsteps echoing. It's already kind of creepy enough, but then add a graveyard onto that, and I think this song has kind of an anxious feeling to it. Like
Yeah.
the drums are really like kind of multi-layered and weird, and then you got the bass kind of adding to the groove under that, kind of giving, like you said, kind of a jogging feeling, and then the guitar part, it's kind of minimal and kind of echoey, and then later you have these call and response background vocals in the chorus. It's like the echoing of your footsteps on the metal floors or something. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it sucks because when they play the song live, they don't do the call and response, and they just do the first part, which kind of just takes away from it. But since there isn't two Cedrics, you really can't do it.
Yeah, some songs you just kind of have to make big compromises like that. Like The Crowing by Coheed and Cambria has like 3 overlapping vocal parts at the end, and Claudio, the singer for that band, just kind of switches between them halfway through each one, and it sounds pretty awkward.
Yeah, but I think also what's cool about the song "Drunk Ship of Lanterns" is right after, I would say, probably like the first verse, there's this kind of part where it's not necessarily call and response, but it's this kind of back and forth thing where there's these 2 different sections that are almost completely different from each other in 2 different time signatures, where one is sort of Omar playing this kind of like this arpeggio, and then the other one is him playing this like the solo, but in like a completely different key, and it really does feel like they just smashed together 2 different parts from 2 different songs, but it just works because of how kind of shifty it is. Like it gives you this feeling of just running around through this submarine where there's like you have like parts where you feel like you're safe and then parts where you don't, like the monster's coming back from you or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know, it's I'm stuttering over myself but how cool this song is.
yeah, and I mean, structurally, this is another pretty cool one. Like, because they do the classic songwriting trick of saving the chorus, where when they do the first chorus, they just do like the first part of it. They just do the pre-chorus, and then go straight into verse 2. And then when you get into the next part, you finally get that part where the guitar's like playing a more coherent riff, because up to that part in the verses it's pretty minimal, and like half the riff is dead notes.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the pre-chorus, it's doing like these kind of weird high up, slow, like I'm not entirely sure if they're arpeggios, but like pretty weird high up riff.
Yeah.
But then you get into the chorus, like the real chorus, and you get into like a pretty nice lower riff that the drums are like banging along to, and you're like, and now things are really building up, and then you get into the bridge, which is just a big explosion. Like there's a weird echo on the guitar, and they're playing some like really high, really chaotic notes, and there's like three Cedrics screaming at you.
Yeah.
And you're
I think
like,
also,
whoa, shit, what's going on now?
yeah, I think what's cool about the, I guess, I don't know if it'd be like the pre-chorus or like the pre-bridge or whatever, but there's this one part where it's like the sort of chugging on and off riff, and like in between the drums and the congas are like really line up and sync up well. I think you know what I'm talking about, what it's like the sort of da-na-na, like that part.
Yeah.
Like, you just have the drums kind of banging along, and it really sort of, it shows how well thought out the percussion was on this song. Like, I mean, I don't know how much time it took to make, but just like, you can tell that they really were just like, how do we make this sound good?
Yeah, well, in this song, it actually has a second percussionist on it, which is why you kind of have these overlapping drum parts, because the drums themselves are John Theodore, and then the rest of the percussion, the congas, all that stuff, is a guy named Lenny Castro. Hopefully not related to Fidel Castro.
Yeah. No, I think he's like one of the percussionists who like did stuff with Red Hot Chili Peppers, I believe. I don't know, but yeah, no, it shows that the song has like more than just like, John playing. And I think that's also kind of something that is taken away during the live show, or at least during the early parts, or at least during the early years when they didn't have an extra percussionist, because it's just John sort of playing kind of the sort of really quiet sort of like drum roll, and it just kind of doesn't really feel as chaotic,
Yeah.
which just takes away from it.
I mean, the thing about the Mars Volta is that they can do a lot of great live shows, but every once in a while, they're such a studio heavy band, especially when you start getting into some of these albums after the first one here, where it's like every song has like 3 guitar tracks and like 2 percussion tracks and like a whole studio orchestra coming in on every track on Francis the Mute,
Yeah.
and like horn sections out of nowhere on that album and Amputecture, that you can't always capture everything, but a lot of the times it can just, all you really need is just like the guitars blaring away and then like the keyboard swelling up like it does on the bridge here.
Yeah.
And then yeah, this song, it's great because it goes from just like kind of continually building up this kind of anxious feeling into a big explosion in the bridge there, and then just a lot of weird stuff. And I really like, we mentioned the call and response vocals in the verse. There's another vocal thing in parentheses here on Genius, and that's like there's a part in the chorus, in the pre-chorus rather, where there's these like reversed weird vocals from Cedric, which are him saying "Don't turn back, don't turn back, don't turn back," which like it's pretty spooky.
Yeah, because they go from like one side of sort of the song room or whatever. They go from like one channel to the other, but like halfway through it like gets slower and slower. So it's just like it's not like his voice is like dissolving into the background. It's really cool, and it sort of adds to the sort of not only the sort of the anxious feeling, but also sort of the jogging feeling.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice stuff going on with like the stereo on this album. Like we mentioned with the first track, how like the lead guitar is almost entirely in the left channel on that song.
Yeah. So continuing on, I think this is all our thoughts on this song, right? Do you have anything else to say, Max?
No.
All right.
One anecdote was enough.
Yeah. So the next song on this album is, I think we all said earlier, this is one of our favorites, Ariatarka.
Which
yeah, it's pretty much my favorite, like tied with This Apprentice Must Be Unearthed.
now,
Yeah, so
quick thing about this song. So on Wikipedia, it lists like all the, words that are in other languages for us filthy Americans to understand. Like how Cicatrice from Cicatrice ESP, the song after this, is Spanish and Portuguese for scar. However, it doesn't list what the word Ariatarca means. I'm not sure what language it is, but I just looked it up like 20 minutes ago. You could probably all hear the typing and the sounds of my desk on the recording. And it means homeland, which I think is
Does it?
interesting. Yes, because
I
this
looked
song.
up. I think I looked up the word, but like I couldn't find any meaning behind it. 'Cause I just
Um,
look up the song and I just see Mars Volta.
well, I looked up Ariatarca word meaning, and I found a Mars Volta fan forum where they said it meant homeland, which is interesting because this song is very much the opposite. It takes place in like an extremely messed up hospital.
Did they say what language it was from?
I I think it said it was like German or something. Maybe not
Uh,
German. I don't.
I
I
just went
think
on
they
Google
had it
Translate.
in parentheses.
All right,
for
I just
like
went
the
on Google Translate and I
English
typed it
speakers.
in. Apparently, and it came up with it's Maori for your area, and Maori is the language of the New Zealand indigenous people. So
Hmm.
who knows?
Who knows? Um, I mean,
Yeah,
still kind of a similar meaning though. Homeland, your
sure.
area, and like I said again, very kind of opposite to the actual setting of the song, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember looking up this song, and apparently it's about like dogs, like these dog doctors and nurses that like heal your wounds by like sewing other dogs into them to heal them, or some like weird crap.
They heal your wounds by licking them, which is kind of a
Oh,
play on
okay.
which is kind of a play on the term licking your wounds,
All
which
right.
doesn't actually make them better at all.
So,
So again, really cool like metaphorical stuff going on there.
all right. So this song is really interesting. It starts off with just these kind of similarly to the end of Sonata Lumiere, where it's just these sort of guitar riffs and sort of the drums doing these drum rolls. But then like the guitar, I guess the main verse part comes in, and it's this really weird kind of off-kilter mix of arpeggios that is really melodic, but also kind of just not. It's all over the place, and it's just a really interesting riff. And to add to it, when it's playing, like when it starts, there's just like this fade out of guitar feedback, like you're just like getting out of an explosion, the sound slowly fading out to just this, you know, weird multiple arpeggiated guitar riff. It's a really interesting effect, and I really like how it starts.
Yeah, like the feeling that I kind of get from it is fitting with this setting. I feel like it's almost like you're being sedated. Like this riff, it's like it's a very like an emotion that I almost can't place. Like it sounds kind of melancholic, but it's so distorted and feedbacky, very musically correct terminology,
Right.
that it sounds kind of angry at the same time, and it's like that emotion is kind of fading away, and then there's a really cool moment here where after the first chorus, which we'll get into, the song just kind of suddenly dies out, and there's some noise for like just a few seconds there, and then the riff comes back, but it's clearer now, and there's another solo on top of it, and it's like
Yeah.
all the emotion just kind of explodes, and then yeah, and this is a very emotional song. Like the vocals are just in the verse and the pre-chorus are just heart-wrenching on Seven's
Yeah.
end.
It's not like because this band is not usually like a band to do sad stuff. Like even with At the Drive-In, like they only had a couple songs that I really describe as like strong and like emotionally charged, and like not necessarily in like the really powerful just like way, but more in like the trying to evoke a feeling of sadness way. And this is like the one song on this album which kind of does that. Maybe Televators does that later, but this is the one song I think really does that well because it's a lot more emotional. Like Sergey is really putting a lot more into just sort of singing soft, especially like right before the part where the build up to the first chorus comes in. He's hitting all these high notes with all these sort of layers on himself, and it really just sounds like tortured and pained in a
Yeah,
way.
this song, when I first listened to the album, I kind of forgot to mention this when I was talking about my kind of thoughts and impressions of the album, but the first time I listened to it, I basically had no idea what was going on for the first 5 tracks. But when this came on, this was the first song I really connected with. Like, it just really just kind of hit me in the right place at the right time. And I think it helped that, or rather it didn't help that, like, on the first few songs, one thing I really like about the Mars Volta is I think it lets Cedric really kind of flex his range more than At the Drive-In. It's like on At the Drive-In, like on Relationship of Command, there's really only 2 songs where he isn't kind of doing the like kind of shouty thing that he does for most of the album. But and I think when I listened to the album the first time, I kind of roped the first 5 songs vocals in with that because I was stupid. But and so and the fact that the vocals are so soft and kind of restrained until we get into the chorus, where everything is suddenly a lot louder again. After that great, just big build up there, like I love how you're in this kind of softer, more calming place at first, and then there's just a lot of big build ups there. There's like these really big guitar chords coming in, and the drums kind of emphasizing every time a chord comes in, and then we get into the chorus where like the drums are just kind of pounding away on the snares and the toms, and the guitars are doing these kind of like high up chords. It's such a great like tone shift there.
Yeah, I think the chorus is like really strong, especially where with Cedric's lyrics, where it's just like this really kind of distorted, just mess of the sound, and he's singing like tract marked amoeba landscraft, cartwheel of scratches, dress the tapeworm as pet, and it's just like, it just sounds just like you go from just like really sad to just like really terrified.
Yeah,
like a cartwheel of scratches just sounds like, you know, I don't know, like a weird like torture device.
Yeah, like so this song has a ridiculously in-depth description of what it represents in the plot on Genius, but he like goes through like a really like weird surgery, and that's such a like fittingly like kind of scary, fuck it, that's a good enough word. Like it's a scary way of describing it, like a cartwheel of scratches. Like, I mean, that is kind of what it is. Like you do kind of you get wounded so you can get healed, I guess, is is my pretentious way of describing it.
Yeah, so then like after that we have like another verse in the chorus, and then the bridge comes in, and it's technically more like 2 bridges because it's made up of 2 parts. It's the first part where it's like, you know, them playing this more kind of, not necessarily like less powerful, but a lot more sort of, I guess it would be less powerful. It's just this calmer part where Cedric is singing "Evaporate the Fur." Oh, where's the part? I'm trying to find it. Yeah. Evaporated the fur before it covers them. If he only knew the plans they had for us. And it's just, he's like, because it's like kind of a combination of sort of the verse and the chorus of tones, where you have him singing in this more kind of melodic way, but the sort of the instruments are still firing on all cylinders. It's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing there. It's almost like he's kind of capturing like the both viewpoints there, and it's interesting how we suddenly kind of go from like we're kind of back into the verse, which the verse, you know, he keeps repeating, is this wrong, are they gone? There's this big sense of regret there, and then we really get into that when we get into the calmer section of this bridge, where he says, they used to have pulses in them, but impulse has made them strong. Where
yeah, I really like that part. Like,
that's such an evocative lyric.
Yeah, it's probably the calmest this album really ever gets. Like, even on like the other calmer stuff on this song, and even on stuff like Drunk Ship of Lanterns and Roulette Dares, like this is probably the calmest it ever really gets. Except maybe for Televators.
Yeah, the first verse of Televators.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but yeah, this and also what's really interesting about this part is that it's also pretty short. Like the common part of the bridge, it only goes. They only repeat that lyric twice, where you usually expect to do it like 4 times. So they only do it twice. So it kind
Yeah.
of it. It's at the same time I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't go farther with it. But also I feel like if they did, it kind of would take away from the specialness that the part has. Like it's a little short bit before the song kind of fires on all cylinders again.
Yeah, well, it's nice because first you have the stanza that you quoted earlier, about if you only knew the plans they had for us, and then they get into the pulses part, and they do that twice, and then they repeat the earlier stanza again. So it's kind of nice how it's just kind of dying down a lot, and then it's building back up, and then we get into the third chorus, and the guitar part changes here. It's the chords are still pretty weird, but like, well, the guitar and the drums change. The drums are like almost punky now, and the guitars are playing like some lower chords and just kind of chugging away. And like it really, it's kind of emphasizing. He sings the regular lyrics, regular. He sings the usual lyrics first, and then he sings "Gotta be a way of getting out. Are you just growing old?" When like after a quick little drum and guitar fill there, and like now in there's this, it's like pulse pounding now. You feel like you're running out of this place that you're trapped in.
Yeah,
It's great. Like it's not a huge change to the chorus, but just changing up this rhythm guitar part and these drums, like it really makes the song feel so climactic.
I know it really does feel like you're just like at the end of your rope, and it really, yeah, like you said, it doesn't really change that much. Like it kind of, what they do is that they change it from just kind of be like an on and off guitar thing and drum thing, where it just kind of goes da 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 da, and now it's just like one continuous thing, and it's a small change, but it makes it a lot more powerful and, like I said, a lot more climactic.
Yeah.
So,
What do you have to say about this song, Max?
I think it's the perfect Mars Volta song. Like, the percussion is amazing on this song. The structure is great. It flows very well. It's catchy because I think one of the things that Mars Volta does amazingly is blend progressive, very technical music with very poppy, very catchy sensibilities, where it just appeals to both the pretentious faggots and the people who like pop music. And it's just the perfect Mars Volta song for, I think, to introduce someone to the Mars Volta.
The Mars Volta is great because they satisfy both the pretentious teenager and the emotional teenager within you.
Yes.
all right, and then the song ends with this kind of, I guess, sort of another sort of ambient, multi-layered sort of sound collage.
Yeah.
How, like, most of them end, but it sort of is an interesting transition into the next song on this album, which is Cicatriz ESP. And like we said before, Cicatriz is both Spanish and Portuguese for the word scar.
And
Now,
there's nothing wrong with this song.
Quick thing before we get into this, just last thing I want to say about Areotarca is that was another one, like Inertiatic ESP and like Televators, which we're going to get to in a bit, that, simple structure, just, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. But, like, again, they just amp it up so much and add in these great, like, technical details that it really just, like, elevates it. And it feels like it's a part of something bigger. It doesn't just feel like, oh, we gotta put in 2 sad songs on the album, here's one of them. It's like, no, this feels like just a really powerful point in the narrative.
Yeah, I think it's actually with the whole sort of hospital sort of imagery you have. It really makes it like a good middle song.
Yeah. So,
But anyway,
but yeah, now
so
we're on to
Cicatriz,
Cicatriz.
and I feel like this song is interesting because it's the longest song at the on the album at 12 minutes long, and I feel like maybe all of us can agree that maybe it kind of just it's too long for its own good. I
No, I
guess.
disagree. I completely disagree.
Oh, okay, all right. But like, and the reason why I say that is because of the fact that it's got this very kind of in the middle of the song, Secret Trace, it has this very long sort of ambient part, but it's not like usually you would think it'd be at the end, but it's not. It's in the middle, so it just kind of goes on for like too long, in my opinion, and it just kind of it took me out of it. But about the song in particular, with sort of the way it starts and the way it has, it's actually, all right. You want to describe it, Ray? Because I feel like I've been describing a lot of the songs at first.
Well, I guess the way this song goes is it has this pretty calm verse section. Well, actually, the first thing to mention about this song, it doesn't have an intro. It just goes straight into the verse with a nice weird a cappella vocal line from Cedric with a weird effect over his voice.
Yeah.
And the riff here is simple and clean. It's just like
Yeah, it's just like a chuggy thing.
And we're kind of in this verse for a little bit, and then we're into the pre-chorus, and then suddenly stops for a bit, and then we're like, whoa, what's going on here?
And it's like this helicopter noise, like the sound of like a helicopter taking off.
Yeah. And then again, they save the chorus for a little bit, and after another pre-chorus, we get into the chorus, which, like Inertiatic ESP, is just one phrase, which is "I've defected," just said a bunch of times, which is a really powerful lyric. And I mean, this song, the title, Secretary, is just Scar, and I think that reflects that pretty well. Like, the scar won't heal.
Yeah.
Feeling like you're just broken. Which I feel that anguish is really captured well by Cedric in the chorus there.
I think also it's notable that the guitar riff is also really cool because it's only like 3 chords, but it captures that feeling because it's I mean, obviously it's not atonal like that, but it's just like really powerful, and it really fits in with just the feeling of, I have defected. The scars are all on my body, and it really does hurt. Please take me to a hospital. Not the hospital I just went was in.
Exactly. And then we get into I'd say about 5 minutes of ambient noise, and then it goes back into the pre-chorus, and then back into the chorus. And the weird thing here is that the pre-chorus, the last one there, is longer than all the other ones. I think that might be the reason why it kind of bothers me that we go back into the pre-chorus and the chorus.
Oh, yeah,
actually, okay.
Also, it should be noted that, right after the weird noisy bit, they play this drum track, and it's literally like the drum part from Drunk Ship of Lanterns, but all the notes are played in the opposite order. It's not backmasked, it's like if you took the sheet music and, literally reversed it.
Yeah.
Gives this kind of odd feeling.
I think, yeah, in that ambient section there is really kind of building up, and then it just kind of suddenly cuts, and then we're back into the pre-chorus with just the regular riff, and then we're into the chorus, which now has some backing vocals that are singing "Drag your vessel, punch your clock in," which I really like those lyrics there. It's kind of just like a looming, punching your clock in. That's what you do at a job. It's like these kind of looming sense of responsibility kind of hanging over you. And so I really like that final chorus. And I think my only problem with this song, I think it's just if you made the big ambient bridge in the middle a little bit shorter, and then maybe do a short version of the pre-chorus instead, or just go straight back into the chorus. Because for me, whenever I listen to this song and it gets back into the pre-chorus, I'm like, oh, we're here again. It kind of cuts off the excitement that it was just building up. And I think that's kind of what screws it up for me. This song, still, though, it's pretty cool. I like the sound of the song a lot. That chorus is amazing. That was when I listened to this album for the first time, that was another moment that really stuck out to me, was the chorus on this song. So
Yeah, and especially because it has that big build-up as well at first. You just have this sound of like the sort of weird tremolo helicopter sound, and then it just comes out of nowhere, just strikes you in the back, and you're just like, "Oh fuck! God damn it! Why is this happening?"
um
Uh,
but yeah,
yeah.
those are my thoughts. Now it's time for Max to come in and rain down righteous fury onto us filthy normies.
All right, so I my favorite part of this song is the 5 minutes of ambient noise, um, because I think it just allows for the listener to have some leisure in the middle of the album. Like you're just bombarded by all these emotions and all this intensity that you finally have some downtime. The protagonist of the story finally has some time to breathe and contemplate on his situation, and I think it really takes a patient listener to really appreciate this 5 minutes of ambient noise. And I don't know, it reminds me a lot of like Flood by Boris. If you guys I've listened to that,
And
where
I've been meaning
it's
to,
like
but those hacks didn't put it on Spotify, gosh darn it.
it's like it reminds me a lot of that like feeling, and it also fits in to the hospital context because it's like you're being like affected by very weird drugs that are putting you into this very hypnotic state, because as someone who one time accidentally took too many of my antidepressants, it feels a lot like this long bit of ambient noise, and that's also a story for another time when I have it handy.
So looking at the story for this song for a second here on Genius, it says after Ariatarka, in the surgery that the protagonist underwent, he transformed into they essentially made him into a new person, and he was transported to a new location, into a desert country.
huh? So the song
So
takes place in a desert country.
so um I do think, like, yeah, it could be like that big ambient section in the middle is like the trip, you could say.
Sure.
I what I will say, Max, I think
Mm-hmm.
I might have been wrong to say that it should be shorter. Like, I
Okay.
mean, at most I'd take like a minute off. Like, I think you could still get the same effect. Like, at most I'd take about a minute off. I think you could get the same effect in 4 minutes, but my only problem is just the placement of it. Like, just it never feels like it quite fits into the song right. Like, I like it a lot on its own, but it feels a little out of place. But maybe that's the point, because the protagonist feels out of place. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
who
that is the
knows?
point. It's a perfect song. I mean, sure, structurally, it's a little bit weak, like for a Mars Volta song. But as like judging it on its own without the Mars Volta context, it's perfect.
Yeah. So is that all our thoughts on Cicatriz ESP?
Yes.
All right. So the next song is "This Apparatus Must Be Unearthed," and this probably won't go down with Max, but I think, in my opinion, this is my least favorite song on the album, and not because it's bad. It's just kind of sort of the least good, in my opinion. Like, it's still good. It's just on sort of a scale of all the other songs. This is the one I think is the weakest. I don't know. It's like, I don't hate it. It does definitely have a very powerful like verse, with just that, that sort of screaming about how he's been waiting for so long and how he's anonymous and how he wants to avenge his name. But it's just, I don't know. It doesn't feel as like notable as the other songs, if that makes sense. Like, it kind of feels a bit kind of like an inertiatic ESP repeat. Not necessarily because it's like literally the same, but just like the way it kind of swells, and the way like the verse is really powerful, but the chorus is more quieter.
You have a
It just
mixed
kind
up.
of what?
You have a mixed up. It's the chorus that's the big explosion, and the verse
Oh,
that's a lot calmer.
okay. Oh, I was like, cause that is that part. I always thought that was the verse, but
No.
Never mind. Yeah, no, that is the chorus. It just starts with the chorus. It's just kind of really weird.
Yeah.
All right, so ignore everything I just said there.
Okay, well, I'm gonna be in the middle between you guys. But firstly, fun fact. Yeah. On Wikipedia, it says here, this apparatus must be unearthed is a play on the warning frequently found on guitar amplifiers and other electrical equipment. This apparatus must be earthed.
Yeah, and I have not found that on any of the guitar amps that I have, so maybe that's like an old thing. Oh, also, this is also the other song on the album that was co-written by Cedric, which was the Vala, that and Drunk Ship of Lanterns, so I don't know if it really shows, though, because Cedric hasn't really written a lot of music to my knowledge, but yeah, just a fun fact.
He's done a couple solo albums.
Oh, yeah, no.
But either way, this chorus is amazing. Like, okay, I will admit, in my opinion of this song, so this song is verse, chorus. I mean, this song is chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. I think I did one too many. Bridge, chorus. And the thing is, I think the verses here aren't that interesting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I meant.
I think the bridge is pretty great, though. But I think the chorus is so amazing that, like, I wouldn't call this... I would... That, like... To me, the chorus is one of the best parts of the album in general. That, like... That, like, the whole song, I can't say... Like, even if the verses are weaker, I'm okay with that, especially because I love how it builds into the chorus. Like, I just... Again, this is one of the more straightforward moments lyrically, but it just gets so directly to the heart of the matter. I've been waiting for so long for someone to mend all the blame. Like, God, don't you just feel that? Again, it speaks to the emotional teenager within you. And just like this, it's like they took emo the genre and emo the cultural idea, and they combined it into one, and then made the guitar part 10 times weirder than it would be in any case, and multi-track the vocals so they sound twice as emotional. Like,
I think Max has something to say.
Okay, I just want okay, I'll just say one other thing. The other great thing about this chorus is how they lead into it. I'm like, in the verses you have those great little like open hi-hats from the drums, and Cedric kind of going way up into the high range before he goes back down in the chorus. And then at the start of the song you have the really weird kind of ambient guitar noise that's really kind of weird and abrasive and always kind of sticks out to me when I listen to the album in a good way. So yeah, just that's my opinion on the song, is that the chorus is great. Verses are a little bit weaker, but they flow into the choruses really well. And then the bridge, when he says, this is the altar, the one that you let me die in, I always feel really, really emotional when you get to that part. But yeah, so now it's time for Max to gush even harder.
Listen, the verses may be a little bit weak, but in my opinion, they act as sheer build-up to the 10 out of 10 chorus. Like, this is one of probably in my like top 100 choruses of all time. Like, it's one of the I think it's the real emotional climax to the entire album, the real turning points of all this. And it's just, I think this also should have been the ending song. I think,
really?
Yeah, I think track 10 and track 8 should have been switched around for a better flow, because that's like one of my big problem, which is why this album isn't a 10 out of 10, is because the final track does not have enough emotion to it for a ending.
Wow.
I would actually almost agree with that if it weren't for the final moment of the ending track when he does the Who Brought Me Here, that big section.
Yeah, but we'll get to that when we get to it.
Okay, but before we get to that, I'm sorry, I haven't, like I said, I'm on Genius. I am very good at doing research. And that was a joke. And okay. There's only one comment here, on this Genius page for Take the Veil Serpentax, the last song, it just says Lamau and it has 10 downvotes.
Wow. Okay. But I don't know. This song kind of didn't really stick out that much to me. I mean, again, the chorus is great. I will give it that, especially like the part where he starts screaming anonymous, and, like the weird kind of like staticky effect on his vocals, where it just sounds like he's screaming to you through like a telephone.
Yeah, the way that the anonymous and avenge my name there, the way that it's the two phrases really overlap and intertwine is just like, whoa.
Yeah. Also, I think it's cool how at the beginning of the song, so the bass plays in like 3 different octaves as it like builds up.
Yeah.
That was a nice touch.
Yeah.
But is that all for this song?
Yep.
Yeah, I
okay.
guess so.
So the next song is. Oh,
I was just gonna say, I don't really have much to say about the story, just because that chorus just cuts so much to the heart of things. It's like, I don't fucking need to know.
yeah. All right. So the next song on this album is Televators. And if Ariatarka, or is it Ariatarka? Yeah. Ariatarka. Yeah. Sometimes I always get it mixed up with like Aratarkia, but no, it's Ariatarka. So if Ariatarka was not the ballad that this album has, then Televators would be that ballad. This song is the slowest this song is the slowest the album gets, and is also the most sort of relaxing it gets. And it really has this kind of sort of wandering feeling with the sort of the calming guitar riff and the bass that actually isn't a bass guitar. It's a double bass that's played by some guy called Justin Meldal Johnson, apparently. And yeah, so this song actually has a stand-up. It's a stand-up bass, but it's the same thing, double bass. And
well,
I think
I don't think double bass would be the correct term there. I think it is a stand-up bass.
It's the same. It's the same thing. But yeah, what I really like about this song is the chorus where it goes. Where is it?
You should have seen the curse that flew right by you.
Page of concrete.
Fucking love that lyric.
Yeah, page of concrete, stained walks crutch in hobbled sway, auto defay, a capillary hint of red. Only this manupod crescent in shape has escaped. Like that is just like a really, and like when you listen to like the song, it's like multiple different tones from Cedric. Like it really does feel like they recorded 3 different versions of him singing it. Not necessarily in the fact that they're playing it all at the same time, but like the way how it like kind of sort of layers on it in steps, because it's like I'm not going to sing it, but it's just like it. If you listen to the song, you'll know what I mean. Like this is just like a lot more of like a. It really just kind of just layers that like vocals, and it works. I really do enjoy that part of the song. The rest of the song is kind of forgettable because it just kind of just. I guess except for the part where he goes stalk the ground, that part's pretty cool. But it's just like, I don't know. This song is just kind of not necessarily generic, but kind of,
I have to disagree. I think this might be tied with Ariatarka for my favorite song on the album. I really like it. Just like, firstly, we were talking about the lyrics earlier. I love. The tone of this song is so great. Yeah. It's different from most of the album. Like, so firstly, I think this is the first song on the album to not be from the first person perspective of the main character. This song, I'm not really sure who the speaker is, but it's third person and it's like mourning the death of the character. Like, and I mean, this is the song where, like, I think the real life narrative really kind of hits you, where you really kind of feel the tragedy of the situation. Like, especially, you should have seen the curse that flew right by you. It's like, it almost feels like it's a very spiteful sounding lyric, and like you almost can't quite tell if they're talking to the man himself, saying that he should have like thought more about his actions, or if they're saying that to like the people grieving for him, that like they should have seen the mental state that he was in before he,
Yeah.
jumped to his death. It's such a biting lyric, and like and that's helped by the this song is, like, in terms of the vocals, one of the more raw recordings on the album, except for the harmonies on when he sings "Stalk the Ground," and then later, "Pull the pins, save your grace, mark these words on his grave" in the bridge, which again, such evocative lyrics. I absolutely love those there.
Yeah,
And
I think
like,
that's
uh,
probably wrong to say. It's probably wrong to say that the song was generic. It's kind of. I haven't listened to it in a while, but it's just I feel like yeah, I really do enjoy this song. I just I don't know. I think I just might have gotten a little off track there, but
at
yeah,
this
no,
point,
it's a
I'm
great.
not arguing with you. I'm just going on
Okay.
because I love it. Like,
All right.
in that bridge, there's some vocal harmonies there, and then of course she starts like kind of echoing the words he's singing, which I really love. I'll get back to the bridge, but the point is that for most of this song, this is like just kind of Cedric and the acoustic guitar in the first verse. So when that multi-tracked chorus vocal comes in, it feels like the weight of the world crashing down on you, and like, and again with this chorus, I love the lyric, "a capillary hint of red." No clue what capillary means, but like,
All right.
a hint of red, the blood splatter when he hit the ground. Like, I love that description. Like, I love that the means of death is like rearing its ugly head in the conversation, and like, I I like and I and like that last lyric in the chorus when he sings, "Only this manupod crescent in shape has escaped." What the fuck is a manupod? But he sings
I
it so emotionally, and the way the guitar kind of like accents different words there, and like, even if I'm not entirely sure what he means, like, the idea, I like how the emotion, the emotional range of this chorus is great, because at first it goes from spiteful and then to kind of mourning, and then like kind of getting the darker hints of what really happened, and then they say he's escaped. It's like they're saying that in a way the fact that he died meant that he finally found peace. Like, I this song, it just tugs at my heartstrings so much. Like, and when we get into verse 2, and when he starts getting like into the higher range, really
yeah.
emotional with the
I was gonna say
vocals,
I completely forgot about that part, but it's great.
I love how emotional that is, and then I love that it suddenly cuts out for the "Stalk the Ground" lyrics. I like the lyrics in the bridge are like probably the most evocative of all. "Pull the pins, save your grace, mark these words on his grave." Like pull the pins. It's like, let all your emotions out. Like, don't even try to hide it. And then save your grace. Again, it's like, it's almost like they're telling the people in mourning, like, just like, don't try to just like hide it behind like politeness. Like, you don't run away from the grief you feel, almost.
All
And
right,
then
so
yeah, so just lyrically I love this. I really like it. It's pretty simple on the guitar front. Like, there's a nice little distorted solo that comes in uh before the second verse. um but and but really, I like how stripped back this song is, how it's really just, again, just going straight to the core. And then but then finally when we get into the chorus, just the band comes in, and again, weight of the world.
yeah.
I feel this song deep
All right.
in my soul. What
So
about
I'm
you, Max?
Oh, I was gonna say before I'm gonna cut in. Capillary apparently means any of the fine branching blood vessels that form a network between the arteries and the venules, and then also it's a tube that has an internal diameter of hair-like thinness. So
Okay,
yeah,
so again, talking about the blood.
yeah. But anyway, what are your thoughts, Max?
You know what this song reminds me of?
What?
Tom Souser Todd, because it's kind of like a reverse of that. While Kamsus Todd is about the protagonist trying to kill themselves, or basically a suicide note, this one is the witnessing of a suicide or after a suicide, and and that's what makes it so emotional in the context of the story. It's the big, sad, emotional bit. And that's what makes this song so powerful. And both Kamsutra Todd and this song has a weird, noisy kind of last bit, which kind of cements the entire emotion of it. And it's basically the perfect song. This is actually my favorite song. I changed my mind.
I did it.
It's like your favorite anime character dying. This is what it feels like. This is what this whole song feels like. This big epic death of an anime character.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's. Do you have anything like last things to say about this song, Ray?
Not really. Just
All right.
again, the percussion is amazing. Like I
Yeah.
think that's the only thing instrumentally I have to add. One thing I will say about this album as a whole is I feel like I mentioned how great the keyboard parts are, but I do feel like on this album they're a little bit more subdued. Like we only really talked
Yeah.
about them on Inertiatic ESP. I
Yeah, I
feel
think-
like that might be one aspect that might have been harmed by the mix a little bit, because like I can remember all the times that they really swell up on Francis the Mutant Amputecture, whereas I can't remember as many like keyboard parts on this album. Although
Yeah.
there were some cool ones here on Televators, kind of in between the verses and the choruses, kind of setting the mood nicely.
And on Cicatrice ESP, where it's like kind of the sort of not descending, but like what's the reverse of descending?
Ascending.
Ascending sort of keyboard part on sort of the verses of Cicatrice. So it's yeah, I think definitely this part, the keyboards on this album aren't really as sort of grandiose as they are on later albums, but
Actually,
like you said,
on the ambient sections of both Roulette Dares and the jams there, and on Cicatrice, keyboards there are pretty great too. But yeah, that's still only 4 songs.
so finally we get to the final track on this album, Take the Veil, Serpentax. This is where it all sort of comes down and it gets really just like, I think I'll say this, but this next to Area Tarka, this is my favorite track on the album. Like, I love just how really just powerful the song is on all the parts that it has. Like, even during sort of the parts where it's a bit calmer, it still just like really gets to you. And I love it. I really love the song. Like how it starts with that kind of crazy ass melody, and like the crazy bass part as well, and it gets to the verse, and it's just like this really cool kind of like, you know, you have like the one guitar and like one channel playing this really weird arpeggiated melody, and then the other channel there's like this weird kind of like warbly guitar feedback thing going on. Oh god, and then like the verses, and then like every yeah, I love this song.
This song, it is interesting. I feel like, okay, so when this song starts out, it has that weird like reverse reverb going on the guitar there. That's one of the moments where I can really feel like, this should be more louder than it is. More louder. Derp. This is one of the moments where it feels like, the mixing kind of hurt this, because it's like, it's such a really unique sound going on there, but it just kind of hangs into the background until we get into the nice little noodly riff going on in the verses there, which I do appreciate a lot. Looking at the lyrics here, you know, it gives all the section names. it kind of made me forget that this song basically has two choruses, because there's the refrain where they go, you take the veil, you take the dive, you take the veil, which
Yeah.
I really like that section. I like that the guitars aren't doing much there, that it's almost entirely just the like multi-tracked echoey vocals, and the bass just kind of like with a really just kind of like crunchy sound just going like dun there.
Yeah.
I really like that section, and then I like when the chorus comes in. There are these the backing vocals there. I think add a lot when he sings, "They're gonna get you, you better run now. They're gonna get you, you better run now." Like,
Yeah.
and then I also like that this one definitely goes all over the place. Like, again, they call it a refrain, but really this song has two choruses, and
Yeah.
then it has a bridge, and then like basically two outros. Which again, that second outro with the "Who brought me here, forsaken, depraved, and rotten fear." That's like a
Yeah.
really powerful part of the song, and such a great way to end the album, especially because
Yeah.
it just kind of suddenly cuts, and then that's the end of the album. So
I think
there's a
also
lot about this song that I really like, but overall, I do think like sometimes I'll listen to as I like to call it an abridged version of this album, where basically I just listen to the first two tracks, um and then usually skip forward to well, then sometimes I keep Roulette Dares, but sometimes I'll just skip straight to Drunk Ship of Lanterns, then Areotarca, skip Cicatrice, maybe keep. Okay, point is, sometimes I'll listen to a quote unquote abridged version of this album where I skip some of the tracks, and sometimes I'll just end it on Televators because that song strikes more of a chord with me than this one does. I still like it a lot as as an ending to the album, especially because in this song we almost see that the protagonist didn't really find peace,
yeah, I
which
think
is a really which is like a sad ending because you've seen how much struggle and strife there is throughout the entire album, and it's a nice like art housey kind of ending there.
yeah.
But
I'll say this now. Oh,
but
I'll
I
say
just
this now. Oh, sorry. All right.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to wrap up what I'm saying. But just like I feel like going from the really powerful emotions of Televators to this song, it always feels like a little bit of a step down, except for that final outro there. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Okay, so now I think it gets my point, but I think definitely I've said this before in like previous conversations, but I feel like this is the part where like it's it's like if he's waking up from his coma and he crawls to the roof of like the hospital. This is the part where it's him falling down after jumping off, like the "Who brought me here, forsaken, deprived, and wroth with fear, who turned it off, the last thing I remember now." Like that's just him falling down, speeding, remembering everything he's like gone through, getting licked by the dogs, getting all this like weird crap that nobody understands, and like once that song ends, it's where he hits the ground and like he just dies. But I think the song is interesting for a lot of reasons, though, and it's the part. There is one part where I feel like the sort of the volume problem kind of shows, and it's the part right before it goes into sort of the quieter bit, and like right before it goes into the last sort of like post chorus with the who brought me here. So these guitars that kind of shoot and then just do this weird kind of like reverb thing, and it gets really loud, but not in really a good way. I always have to turn my volume down to that part, if you know what I'm talking about. You know that part?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean because there's parts of this song where it gets pretty noisy.
Yeah, I think the song is really weird also because it's like there's this part where like this sort of quiet bit, and then it just cuts to this really weird part with Omar playing this really off-kilter like melodic riff with like this really like electronic sound to it. Like it's completely different from the rest of the song. It's weird.
I think one problem with this song for me, like that part in particular, I suddenly became Southern. In particular, is that they did it better on Tetragrammaton. the second track on Amputecture, because that song also has like a section where it's like way building up, and then just suddenly we get into like the ridiculously weird vocals and lyrics from Cedric, and like a really
Yeah.
weird, like you said, almost a melodic noodly guitar part there from Omar. Just
Yeah.
like, and that's one thing about this song is I almost feel like it needed a little bit more space than it does. This is the rare Mars Volta song where I'm like, you could add another minute and it would be even better.
But I think probably my favorite part on the album, aside from the last part, is the part, sort of the jam bit, because it's just this really cool melody that loops over in itself. And I think also this is where Isaiah really kind of shows his strength, especially with those kind of sort of. It's hard to describe what it is, but it's this kind of sort of like scale thing that he does in that part, and it's just like with especially with the guitars also doing this cool bit. It's just I really do like the jam part on the song. It's probably the my favorite part. Like I just said, it's just I don't know. I think I'm probably like a train on this, but I really do love like the song.
Well, no,
But
it is a good song. I don't I don't think there are, like, out of everything I've heard from the Mars Volta, um especially like in terms of this album, I don't think there are any outright bad songs. I
yeah,
think
no,
it's
that's why I
extremely
said
rare that the Mars Volta would do an outright bad song. I just think that, like, I like the song. It just, again, it just kind of feels like a step down from like the last two songs, which are where we're just really like going all out with the emotion, just amping it up to 11. It feels kind of weird here. So,
all right,
yeah.
but
Also,
I think
are we gonna talk about the bonus track?
okay.
No,
Well,
I haven't listened
before
to
we
it.
Yeah, we're not.
okay.
That was a
Well,
joke.
before we do that, I think Max was talking about some interesting thoughts on the song, and I think they should go now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you brought this up, and it was just as this track ends way too abruptly. I
Huh?
think there needs to be something at the end that kind of evens this song out and really ends this album well. Because this song on its own is an amazing song, but in the context of the album, just feels like it's just ending without giving the story any justice, really. Like that's my big problem with it. Like this is why I otherwise it's a perfect album.
That's interesting because all three of the Mars Volta's first three
Yeah.
albums, and all the first three Mars Volta albums all end this way, and that's something I actually like in all of them, even though I think we're gonna disagree about the last part of Amputecture when you listen to it, Max. But I like it in all three cases because, like, the stories in a Mars Volta album or the themes explored, or general just lyrics and sound, like a lot of it's very just outright bizarre or like really over the top and grandiose, but there's always this kind of weird creepy feeling underneath, and I always feel like the way that it just kind of suddenly cuts like captures that aspect pretty well. Like it always feels kind of disconcerting when I end a Mars Volta album, like especially on Francis the Mute, the one after this, where it just suddenly cuts into an entirely different musical phrase at the end of the album there, but we'll get to that
Yeah.
when we get to that.
Yeah. But I think in my opinion though, this is one of my more favorite songs off this album. Even if like you guys don't like it as much, but
More
again,
favorite?
all right, yeah. Bad grammar aside, I think we said all we said about this song, so I think our conclusions should start now. Unless you have anything else to say.
Yeah, I think we're on to the conclusions. So yeah, like Noise, as with Noise, this is like my second favorite of the Mars Volta albums that I've listened to. Um, yeah, I think it's just there's a few choices in terms of like uh, album structure, song structure, and production that make it feel like this is almost perfect. And that's why I give it a 9 out of 10, is because there are so many great moments on this album that do just kind of like really hit you. I think this makes sense as being the most what is that sentence? It makes sense for this to have been the most successful Mars Volta album because I think this is the most emotionally direct one. Like, I think one thing about this album is, like, and one thing that I have to kind of applaud it for is that I think it's really re-listenable. I think it has the highest re-listen value out of the earlier Mars Volta albums because, the like on Francis the Mute, all the songs are like 10 minutes and flow into each other.
Yeah.
And on
all of them are over 10 minutes.
And on Amputexture, even though there are shorter ones, you still have like the only ones you can really just kind of go back and listen to on their own are Vermicide because it's like an acoustic song, and Viscerize because it's just a cool hard rock song. Even like Asilos Magdalena has like a big weird electronic freak out at the end of it. But whereas this song, like, I sometimes I'm just like, I feel like listening to the Mars Volta, and I'll like just listen to the first two tracks, or I'll just listen to Drunk Ship of Lanterns or Areatarca or Televators. Like this, I do like. I think this album, it's, I think even though I would say that Francis the Mute did what a lot of this album was trying to do better, and even Amputexture, there's a couple spots where I think it does things this album was trying to do better. I still think that it is a standout in their discography. I think it deserves all the acclaim it's gotten, and I think it's intensely re-listenable, intensely emotional, intensely fascinating.
Yeah. I think, again, like I said before, this is my second favorite Mars Volta album, tied with Francis the Mute. Towards my favorite one, which we'll get to when we get to it, but I do like how this album just, like you said, it feels a lot less crazy than their other ones, and I think that's why it's so successful. Also, this is just their oldest one, so it makes sense that it would get the most sales. Because, again, with a band like this, the sort of the rate of people going to buy it is only going to, go so far. But, again, the story is very interesting as well. This album goes really interesting places. It's overall a really cool album, and I really do enjoy it. And I think maybe the issues that I have with this album are a bit of a less an issue than the issues I do have with Francis the Mute. But since, I'm trying to be sort of relative here, Francis the Mute has a lot more stronger parts, so I think overall they pretty much both balance out.
It has higher highs but lower lows for you.
Yeah. So, alright. So, what are your thoughts, Max?
I basically said all my thoughts during the track listing. It's a really good album. I think what appeals to me is just the raw emotion of the album, like just how emotional the whole thing is. And rather than the story, I much rather pay attention to the emotional narrative rather than the actual narrative.
That's kind of what I was trying to say earlier with, like, the metaphor and such that comes with a lot of concept albums. Like,
yeah,
I think the thing about this album is that, it has a story, but, like, I mean, the story is literally about a guy journeying through his own mind. I think the point of the album is more to capture the mindset of someone who's struggling with addiction and suicidal thoughts and all that kind of stuff. And even though I did speak on the story, even though I did talk about the lyrics, even though I did talk about the instrumentation, with a Mars Volta album, it's so fucking dense that we've been talking for 2 hours, almost exactly, and I still feel like there's more that I have to say to fully encapsulate it.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what's special about the Mars Volta, is that, like, there's just so much, and it's all interesting. Even if, like, a lot of it is kind of purposefully weird or purposefully abrasive, like, it still just captures your imagination.
Yeah. So this has been the Esoteric Music Deathspiral. Join us in 2 weeks when we talk about the Mars Volta's next album, Francis the Mute. And join us next week for a rather special album that I won't reveal yet.
A band with similar levels of weirdness, but in a different direction. Do you mind if I say the name?
Sure, whatever.
Ween. We're going to be talking about Ween next week.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my personal favorite albums as well.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's do it. A cool, gimmicky but not as gimmicky as the intro sign-off. I've been Rei the Added Alliterative Appeal.
And I've been the Noisebandit!
And I've been Princess Plunderphonics, aka